All right, so when you get Illustrator open, it should look something similar to this. What you're going to start with is on the top right where it says New File. We're going to go ahead and create a new file. This window will open. This is going to give you options of the file size, a few other things like your color mode. We're going to change the color mode to RGB. So where it says here, color mode, you have a little drop-down menu. If you click on that and go down, select RGB. RGB is for screens and online. CMYK is for print. So we're not going to be printing this. We're just going to be looking at it on our screens. And we can change, it says raster effects and high, change that to screen, which is 72 PPI. All right, and let's go back up to the top here, which says mine defaults to where it says Untitled 1. This is the name of the project. I would just title it something like Project 1 and then your last name. I think that would be something good there. And then you'll see where it says width and height, and also in inches. Make sure this drop-down menu to the right of where it says width is selected on inches. There's a bunch of other options, pixels and points. We want to use inches, so select inches. And our width is going to be 11 inches. I'm just typing that in, going to the box where it says width, typing in 11. And then below that is height. Type in 17. So we have 11 inches wide, 17 inches tall. And again, we call that tabloid size. That's a paper size. And we only need one artboard for now, so that should be already set. Everyone looking good? Okay. And this is all we need to do for now. So we named it. We have one artboard, just change color mode, and then change the dimensions to 11 by 17. When you have this, press create. And you'll get an artboard. This is the artboard, this white rectangle, which is the dimensions of 11 by 17. Excuse me. And this is where you're going to be designing your labyrinth. Now, a few things to note before we get started. Over here, so also, let me just back up. Under Window, or at the top, oh, I'm just realizing you can't see that. So at the very top of my screen is where I see File, Edit, Object, Type, Select, all those menus up there. You should be able to see that easily on your screen. If I hover over Window and then come down to Workspace, I'm going to be using Essentials Classic. So the Workspace is kind of presets of what tools are readily available in front of you. So like if I change it to typography, it changes some of the tools over here, and I see some different stuff. If let's say I then change it to painting, I'll see more colors. So that you're seeing the same thing that I'm seeing, or at least similar, I'm going to Essentials Classic. So I see some options at the top here. I see a window here where I can click on layers. Layers is a big one. We're not going to be using too many layers for this project, I imagine. I mean, you could, but keep the concept of layers in your mind throughout this whole semester. It's going to keep coming up again and again, whether we're working in Illustrator, or Photoshop, or InDesign. I also see the character panel, which is just for setting type, choosing fonts, things like that, which we're not going to be doing right away. Now, a few other keyboard shortcuts that I use a lot. By going to pressing Command and R, So I'm holding down Command and pressing R. You'll see it brings up these rulers at the top and the left. I'm just turning it off and on so you can see. So Command R turns on or off the rulers. If you forget the keyboard shortcut of Command R, you can go to View at the top here and then down to Rulers. And since I have them on, it says Hide Rulers, so I can always click on that. Or if they're off, you go to View, Rulers, and then Show Rulers. So this corresponds with the dimensions of the artboard. You see the left side here starts at 0, right side goes to 11, and again the top from 0 to 17. Now I'll go ahead and show my grid. So go back to View up here, and then scroll down where it says Show Grid. Keyboard shortcut, Command and apostrophe, but again, you can just go to View and then Show Grid. It should default to being set up as a 1-inch square grid. If I zoom in, I'll zoom in a lot. This has divided into eighths of inches, but the slightly darker lines here that show the inch marks. Grids are can come in handy quite often, especially for this first project where we're making a labyrinth. Again, to turn it off and on, it's Command and apostrophe. Okay. I'm going to leave it off just for now so we don't have to look at the lines at the moment. If I'm going too fast, if you need me to cover anything again, please feel free, raise your hand, just say, hey, can you go over that one more time? I'm happy to do that. All right, so the number one tool that you'll be using in Illustrator and beyond is the pen tool. This tool is a keyboard shortcut P, or it looks like the little, what do they call it, I think like fountain pens or something. Over here on your tool panel, you can select that. Your cursor will change to the pen tool. And if I start clicking, I just clicked once and made this point, call this an anchor point. And I'm not holding down, but as I drag my mouse around, you'll see a line is following my cursor. If I click a second time, I just made another point. Now that line stays stationary, connecting those 2 points. And I can move it again. Now I have another line following me. I click a third time. Now that line stays stationary. And then if I go all the way back up to that first point, and then if I get closer, you'll see the cursor changes. It snaps a little bit. See, if I get close, suddenly the cursor, you'll see a little hollow circle beside to the bottom right of the cursor. That means I can now close the path. So I'm hovering over that first point that I made. I see that little circle. I click, and now the path is closed. The line's not following me anymore. Now I've just made a triangle. These are the absolute basics of building shapes, which obviously can be the most basic shapes like triangles, squares, things like that. But any type of digital illustration that's done in Illustrator, I shouldn't say any type, most types are going to be built from basic shapes, and that's how you get a digital illustration. Now just a little bit more on terminology. Again, These are points, and then we call the lines between the points paths. So I'm going to delete this now. If I want to delete it, I have to go back over to my selection tool. It's kind of the default cursor. The top left looks just like a regular arrow. I click on that, then I can click on the path. I can click and drag it around if I want to. This is how you move stuff around. But I have it selected. I can just press delete on my keyboard, and it's gone. I'm going to click back on the pen tool again to show you how to make curved paths. So again, if I click, make a point, and instead of clicking once and then making that straight path between these points, I'm going to click and hold down, and then I'm going to drag my cursor while I'm holding down, and you'll see that it's dragging out what we call a Bezier curve. And as I'm still holding down the cursor, I can still move it all around and change the shape of that curve. Okay, and then when I let go, now it's there. Now you'll notice, as I'm just moving my cursor around now, instead of it being a straight line between that second point that I made and now where my cursor is, now it continues that curve to keep it smooth, basically. Just trying to make it your life easier to keep the shape smooth. If you want that, great. So I could actually close the path already, go back up to that first point. I could just press once and this will be the shape. Or again, I can click and hold down and then drag that curve out. So I can make kind of this Pringle shape, or something closer to a circle. I'm just holding down, and then say I do want to make the Pringle. And then I let go. Now that's the shape there. Now if I go back to my selection tool, I have the shape I can move around. By the way, when you're on your selection tool, you can resize and rotate. So if I click on the path of the shape I made, you'll see the little boxes around the bounding box. Well, first off, if I hover over one of these, I can scale it and squish and stretch it. Or if I hover a little outside, the cursor is curved with two little arrows, and then I can click and drag and rotate it. If you want to make a shape smaller or larger, so scaling it, but let's say you start moving down, but all of a sudden you notice it's starting to get squished or stretched or something, and you don't want that to happen, if you want to constrain the proportions, you hold down Shift while scaling it down. So now I'm holding down Shift on my keyboard. You'll notice as I scale it down, it stays perfectly proportioned. Okay. Now I'm going to delete that one more time. I'm going to start over. I'm going to show you something else with the curves. So let's say I make this kind of curve here. And just like last time, the line that continues from that second point still has a curve to it. But maybe I don't want that. Maybe I want this to be a straight line from this point, from the start, the first and second points here. If that's the case and you want to go back to a straight line, you have to hold down Option, and you'll notice if I just press Option on my keyboard, the cursor changes and I lose that curved line. And while I'm holding down Option, I'm going to click on that second point, just once. So I click, and now it's back to being a straight line, and now I can close the path. And now I have whatever this shape is, kind of this dome. I'll rotate it and it will be like a dome. Okay? Any questions? All right. Next up is changing the color and stroke size of the path and shape. Now again, a little bit more about terminology. This line that we see here, we call that, well, we can call it the path between points, but if we're directly talking about the line quality, we call it the stroke. And the inside of that shape is the fill. So right now, if you look up here at the top left, you'll see this white square and this black square. If you hover over it, actually it's not, I think it used to say fill and stroke. But anyway, the white here is the fill color, the black is the stroke color, and then you notice where it says stroke over here, and then there's a number. That is the stroke weight, which is the width of the stroke. So let me select this shape I made. I'm going to start by changing the stroke weight. Now I can just click the up arrow, and you'll see it's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 points, and the stroke is getting much thicker. I can also just type in a value here, so it says 46 points. I can just type in 70 and press enter. Now it's really thick. This is the stroke. Now again, the inside of the shape is the fill. Right now it's set to white. You can't actually see a difference because the artboard is white and the fill is white. But if I drag the shape off the artboard, you'll notice, okay, now I can see the white fill, and it's on the dark gray background. So if I want to change the fill, I can click on one of these colors here, the little drop-down menu, and then these are the default colors. There's different swatches and things. Just as an example, I'm going to choose magenta, and I've now changed the fill color for the shape, the stroke, and the fill. If you don't want to use any of these default swatches, you'll notice it also have the same colors here on the left side, and it will say fill and stroke. So if you double click whichever one you want, right now it's the magenta. I'm going to double click on it. Actually, excuse me, I need to select my shape first. So I've selected the shape. I'm going to double click on this magenta square. This is where you can really refine the color to whatever you want. So you can move the sliders around, and then the saturation and the value from lightness and darkness. So I can make it like a neon green and press OK. And I've changed the color. Same thing with the stroke color. You can either change it up here, where you have some of the default swatches, or behind this green square, you can see the stroke color. I can just still double click on that one. It brings it to the front. And say I always forget. You have to click on the shape first, and then do this. And now I'm changing the stroke color. Okay, any questions? All right. I'm going to delete that shape. Next up, like I mentioned, there are some tools that will be faster than using the pen tool. For example, specific tools where you can make rectangles, ellipses, polygons, stars, lines, things like that. So this can come in handy in making the labyrinth. First off, let's just look at the line segment tool. This keyboard shortcut was, I guess, backslash, but it just should show up right here. Click on it, and it still has the same settings of that stroke width and color as before. So I'm just clicking, I can drag around, it automatically makes lines. It's very easy. I'm just clicking and dragging, and next thing you know, I have a bunch of lines all over the place. Now let's say I've made all these lines, but then I decide, you know what, no, I don't like how thick they are, and I don't like the color. I can change all of them at the same time. If I go back to my selection tool, you can always, this pops up, you can just move it. And then I'm going, instead of clicking directly on one shape, or in this case, one line, I'm going to click and drag to make a selection. So this is a pretty big area here. At the top left, I know it's further left than this left edge, and it's above the top edge. So if I click, I'm holding down, I'm dragging, you'll see I'm making a selection box. Now I can click and drag over all of these shapes, and it selects all of them. And now I can go change the stroke width. It's changing all of them together. And I can change the stroke color, and they all change together as well. Okay? So that's the line segment tool. I'm going to select all those and delete them. Next up, we'll use the rectangle tool. So it's a little icon that looks like a rectangle. And I'm going to click and drag, and I can make a rectangle of any shape. Delete that. Now under a lot of these tools on the left side, you'll see at the bottom right of each one, there's like a little triangle. If you click and hold down, that means there's other tools underneath that. So if I click and hold down on the rectangle tool, a little menu pops up where I can see others: rounded rectangle, ellipse, polygon, star, or flare. So I'm going to go to the ellipse. This is how you make circles. So I'm going to select the ellipse tool, and now I click and drag, and the same thing happens. I can make an ellipse. You'll notice it's like, what if you don't really want to eyeball to making a perfect circle? Again, hold down Shift, and it will constrain it to be the perfect circle. All right, now we mentioned you can have the stroke and fill, okay? But you can also turn off either or the stroke or fill, okay? So right now I have the stroke and fill turned on. But let's just say I want just a solid blue circle without this outline around it. So I've selected it, come up to the top where I select that stroke color, and at the very top you'll see, oh, okay, you can't see it, hold on, let me scooch this over. At the very top here, top left, you'll see the square with the red diagonal through it. It just says none if I hold over it. If I select that, now I have, it removes the stroke completely, so now I just have a solid filled circle. And likewise, I can turn off the fill and turn on the stroke. As before, when I moved the circle off of the artboard onto the dark gray background, you could still see the white fill. However, now if I do it, because I've turned off the fill, now the circle is just the stroke outline. There's nothing filling the inside. Now a quick way to go back and forth between turning off and on the stroke and fill, you can actually toggle between the two. So again, these two boxes here, fill color, stroke color, right at the top right, there's this, again, little bent arrow. If I have my shape selected and I click on that arrow, it switches between making that magenta color either the stroke or the fill. So it's, you can see it's toggling back and forth between the two. Any questions? Okay. So this is the basics of shape building in Illustrator. Now, getting started with our project, making labyrinths, you can go about it in several different ways. You can be a little more free-form and, kind of all over the place, mapping it out however you want, maybe even more abstract. So, I could just start winging it with my pen tool. Oh, by the way, yes, I should mention, if I have the stroke turned off on the pen tool and the fill turned on, instead of making those lines, watch what happens. Now, it's making that solid shape. It may get a little weird if you're thinking about, I just want to make lines to make this labyrinth. Like, okay, I'm going to make a line here and here and here, and all of a sudden, oh no, now I just have this. Again, this is where, let's say I just want this kind of, it's not closed. I'm not closing the path here. I can click back on my selection tool to get out of the pen tool. And then this is where it comes in handy to toggle between the fill and stroke. Now I do this, and it's no longer that solid fill shape. Now I have this kind of square U shape instead. Okay, but if I start that way, I go back to my pen tool, no fill, just the stroke. I can start just kind of winging it, making lines. Again, if you, this is where keyboard shortcuts come in handy. Let's say I want to make this line, but I don't want it to continue. I want a little opening here for the labyrinth. Well, if I click again, it fills that space between those 2 points. We don't want that. I can just click V, which is my selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and then click back on P for pen tool and start again. Start moving things around. Okay, I want to stop right there. V, click out of it, back to P, click again. You'll notice as I'm clicking and doing this, it's actually a very quick process. You could fill this artboard pretty quickly. Now again, say you make a labyrinth, you say, okay, here's my labyrinth, I'm done. Well, that's not a great labyrinth, So that's where we want to see a good level of complexity. It may require that you start working smaller. So I know I went over this quickly, but to zoom in and out, it's Command plus or minus. So if you hold down Command and press plus, it zooms in. Command minus zooms out. So right now I see the whole artboard, but I could definitely work a lot smaller. Maybe I zoom in, sometimes that's helpful. My labyrinth is, the corners and everything. Again, I'm just kind of going fast. At a smaller scale, it's going to have a much more complexity. Imagine that and then filling up the page. There's just going to be, more paths and little tricks that you could, drop in there. Okay. And again, for this project, for the line segment tool, that can also come in handy. You're clicking and dragging, and then each time you let go, it just keeps that line segment as it is. So I can keep clicking and dragging around here. Now, it's going to, you'll notice, if you want to continue, like have this be a corner, and you click to try to continue that line, well, actually, it's just clicking on that point and it's moving it. So this is where the pen tool can actually come in handy. Now, of course, you can start here. Oops. Click and drag up and then try to match them that way. But you'll get the points are not actually connected. These are actually just two different lines, even though they're lining up. So that's why it doesn't have a nice, neat corner. That's the benefit of the pen tool. There's ways to fix this, but it's a little bit beyond the scope of this project. We're just getting started with the basics right now. All right, any questions at all? All right, so I mentioned talking about layers. Layers will come in handy if you want to change your background color. Because let's say you don't want a white background, you want to have, let's say I'm going to do orange. Actually, I just changed the stroke color. We don't want that. I'm going to make the fill color orange and then come back to where my rectangle tool is. I can actually just click and drag, make a rectangle, the full shape of my artboard. And then I have an orange background. The only problem with this, it's not really a problem, it's just something to be aware of, is that this is its own shape. I can still move it around. And if I start drawing lines over it, we'll just do a few as an example. We'll do orange and black. So I have some sort of shapes or lines, something on top of this orange background. If I don't like these anymore and I want to delete them, so I select all of them and I press delete, well, guess what? You've just selected your background as well, and it deletes everything. So in order to not have this happen, you have to have this solid colored background on a separate layer. Layers are very important. So again, over here, if you don't see it, you're looking for a little tab that says layers. If you don't see it, you can come up to window and then down here and click on layers. Right now, I can see mine, so that's why it's checked. If you don't see yours, come down and click on layers. What I need to do is have that orange shape, which is the background, on a separate layer. So to make new layers, excuse me, at the bottom right, you'll see a little square with a little plus symbol inside. If I hover over it, it says create new layer. Click on that, and then it is added layer 2. Now it gives a little preview on this kind of little thumbnail here. So on layer 1, it shows me that I have that orange rectangle. It's on layer 1. What I'm going to do is actually lock the layer. So again, I'm actually going to go ahead and delete these lines that I made. I don't want to mess up this orange background. I want it to stay there, so I'm going to lock it. So beside layer 1, there's a little empty area. You'll see a little eyeball here. That is for turning on the visibility of the layer. So if I turn off and on the eyeball, it shows or makes that layer disappear. In that space just to the right of the eyeball, this is where you can lock a layer. So if I just click in this empty space right here, then I'll see a little lock symbol that's popped up. Now if I go over here and I start clicking on my artboard, I cannot select and I can no longer move this orange rectangle that is serving as my background layer. It is completely locked. So you'll need to do this if you want to have that colored background, because then when you start building other shapes, again, like the lines, again, if you run into the problem of you lock the layer and you come over to make a line and then it's not working anymore, it's because you're still selected on that locked layer. So you see layer 1, which has a lock. It's highlighted in this kind of light blue. If I want to start making shapes on the second layer, I have to select layer 2, and then with my, in this case, line tool, now I can start making lines. They will be on layer 2, and that solid color background layer is locked on layer 1. If I turn off and on the visibility for the lines of layer 2 I just made, you can see them appearing and disappearing. Any questions about layers? Okay? All right, so if you do not want to kind of just freehand draw, create this labyrinth with lines and pen tool, you can have it be a little more structured by having it snap to the grid that we showed earlier on. So now if I go back and turn the grid back on, and then if I go to View, then near the bottom, there's a little option that says Snap to Grid. So View, and then bottom, Snap to Grid. If I go back to my pen tool, and I click, whoops, you'll notice it's, as I'm dragging down, it's not smooth. It's kind of doing this snapping, jerky motion. That's because it's literally, this point, it is snapping to the grid that I have set up. This can come in handy because this is how you get, it's one way you can get perfectly straight lines without having to eyeball it. You can still make mistakes, but it's going to keep everything really organized. And you'll notice that it becomes much easier. Even let's say I have this area here that I kind of have this cut out. I could, if I was just doing it by, by freehand, I could try to line up these points at the exact same height. However, if you're snapping to the grid, it's going to automatically, if I get close enough, it's going to automatically put them on that same horizontal grid line. And I can just double check by dragging my cursor over, and I can see, yes, it's perfectly at the same height. So this will be good if you want to have a more structured design of your labyrinth.